Hey everyone, I'm Dan Kennedy. I'm a client partner at Trigger XR, which is the world's most experienced developer and creative agency in the XR space. So that's virtual reality, augmented reality, and metaverse activations. We work with great platforms like Snapchat and Niantic, and we have great partners like Molson Coors, Disney, and Nestle. And we have a great relationship with brand innovators, which is why I'm here. Calvin is here because he has been a successful veteran of the food and beverage e-commerce space for the better part of a decade, and most recently and currently is the SVP of e-commerce at Truff, which is a really exciting, growing, what I call elevated brand. And so take it away, Calvin.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, great to be here. So as Dan alluded to, I've been in the emerging CPG food and beverage space for a while now, going on a decade. Actually, previously was with one of David's competitors in the kombucha space at Health-Aid. So know this space well. Been at Truff now for a little over a year, leading e-com and digital for the brand. And again, as Dan mentioned, for those of you who don't know us, it was started with our original truffle-infused hot sauce, launched about 5 years ago, and since then have evolved into and launched into a few other different categories. We now have a truffle oil, pasta sauce, mayo, and most recently just launched our black truffle salt. So excited to be here.
Yeah, we'll get to the salt in a couple minutes and the recent developments there, but I wanted to hear, so like you said, you've been at Truff for a little over a year and have been in the space for a while. What were the kinds of things that excited you about this brand that you could come in and help solve challenges and grow with the company?
Yeah, I think for myself, actually, despite being with a number of emerging brands, this is actually the first digitally native brand that I've ever been with. All my previous brands either started in retail, then launched a DTC e-commerce business after the fact, or launched them concurrently. So I was super excited to get my hands on and join a digitally native brand. And I thought Truff itself is a very unique instance of a brand as well, and how it was founded. So our co-founders, Nick and Nick, the short version of the story is that they actually got the @sauce Instagram handle a few years back, 5 years ago, and initially they were planning on that being just a content feed, having it be a vibe, different images, different lifestyle, working with different influencers, content creators, and then they thought about how could we actually leverage this following that we've generated over the initial stages and develop a product and a brand. And I think they were one of the early or most notable kind of brands to come about that route to market. It's obviously become a little bit more common, and there's a number of obviously creators and influencers that have kind of used their audience and their following to create sizable CPG brands, Mr. Beast, et cetera, being another notable one. But I really thought that was interesting in how they kind of developed the idea for the brand, the product, and how they've leveraged that now into a omni-channel, massive retail brand as well. So really interested in kind of learning that space and how I could take my background, my history, helping scale, evolve, and grow some emerging brands to this digitally native brand that was just breaking into retail at the time.
So coming from that direct-to-consumer, only digital, what are the kinds of either data-driven or other learnings that you guys just started with there that really gave you guys a leg up to, in a really short time, build this really impressive brand?
Yeah, and I think that's what was again part of the reason that attracted me to the brand is that being a digitally native brand, they made the smart choice of not just kind of, we'll call it pigeonholing ourselves into just being a digitally native brand or being leery of venturing into the retail space and saying we're digitally native, we want to stick onto that and really protect our base or our foundation. we really used our social following, our buzzworthiness, our initial online sales velocities, to leverage that into the retail pitch story. And Whole Foods being that first national natural grocer that we're able to break into nationally off the legs of our digital presence. So I thought that was really interesting, and that's kind of been the common story, since then. So we've used those insights, the consumer demand, our social following, to help us with that retail story, as well as with the partnerships that we've also selected and kind of activated with. Obviously, this last year, a couple of big ones being Taco Bell, where we had a 2-week limited run in all Taco Bell locations across the country. I'm talking tomorrow, so I don't want to spill too much on this one, but we also did a limited time collaboration with Hidden Valley. Did a limited time drop, and the only reason that we were able to kind of have that conversation with the Clorox and Hidden Valley team is because of our presence and digital awareness, and association online. So that's been vital to us, and then also with just our positioning in the category. So given our price point, obviously we are a premium brand. If you look at the condiment space, a little bit lower price point, maybe a commodity item, but we have that data from our online, demand, our online velocities, our consumer base to prove that there was a demand, that there was consumer interest in a higher price point or a higher priced item in these different categories. So that all of that was immensely helpful. Again, breaking into the retail space.
So you have this now grown audience, great customers, proven product, and a lot of growth already. So looking to next year, the next 3-4 years, what kinds of strategies or technology are you looking to bring into the marketing fold to continue and increase that growth?
Yeah, and I think in my role overseeing all media and digital platforms, I definitely am the first to say that we're at an advantage being a smaller emerging brand, that we are a little bit more nimble and be able to kind of shift budgets around to what's working, what's needed, and so I think that's very much how we've been able to kind of stay ahead of the curve and grow where we're continue to invest in where we're seeing growth. So one of those areas being retail media. Now that we're in 15,000 plus locations, the majority of our budget previously was on more direct response, DTC, performance channels such as Facebook, Snap, et cetera. But given where the volume opportunity is in the retail space, really made that decision this year to shift budgets around and focus more heavily in retail media. That's where we were seeing the performance. That's where the demand was. Knowing that in the grocery space, 80+% of sales still are taking place offline. Even if we're influencing them offline, that retail opportunity was the biggest size of the prize for us, I guess. So it's continuing to invest and go heavier in those channels that we're seeing performance, but then it's also kind of moving upper funnel as well, where we're getting away from our direct response, performance-based kind of foundation and continuing to build that brand. So we made the choice to, again, shift budget around and actually launch our first linear and streaming national TV campaign. And again, that was pulling from some of our performance budgets as we continue to move up upper funnel and build that brand awareness with our availability, given the reach and pull that TV still has. So it's continuing to test out those new platforms and leaning in where we're seeing those successes and continuing to drive more traffic and awareness in our retail partners.
Okay, I want to talk about Oprah. So
who doesn't?
The salt that Calvin mentioned earlier is their most recent product, and last week, I think
it was last week. Yeah, last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday. Okay, was just released in Oprah's 2020 must-have holiday gifts. So lots of questions about that, just like when do you know that and how do you prepare for that kind of announcement, but also that's presumably going to open up the people that you're making impressions on and your potential audience across just a vast number of people and a whole nother group of demographics. Yeah. So how do you plan for that? You mentioned you're a lean team. You have all these things. Like, how do you like really actually plan for that in a concrete way?
Yeah, and I think thankfully we've knock on wood, this is now our 4th time in 5 years as a brand that we've been on Oprah's Favorite Things. So we like to say, jokingly internally, that it's almost an expectation that we'll be on the list at this point. So we have kind of the track record, the history, but it is a little bit more last minute than you might think, as we'll give or take a month and a half notice before, but we don't get a lot of the materials until the week prior, and then actually the morning of. And a lot of the team, including myself, is on the West Coast, so it's waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. and getting things all scheduled to go out the morning of the announcement. So it's a little bit more hectic and last minute than I think you might expect. But yeah, I think that obviously is again where the agility and being quick to act and quick to action internally is beneficial, because we are able to tee things up as much as possible in advance, and then when we actually are able to announce or activate whether it's the announcement or our paid content to support that launch, or sending out to our CRM with email, SMS, it's a quick work, but the team is ready for it, or all hands on deck. But I think you mentioned kind of the new audience, and I think that's one thing that we've really leaned into, in that obviously for us, we started with maybe a certain demographic, more millennial, Gen Z, really focus on kind of streetwear with kind of environments and type of drops. Obviously, as we expand into Kroger chain wide, Publix, Walmart, we're in over 500 doors. That's a different audience than we were reaching into when we were just a DTC, social focused brand. So it's about how you're kind of tapping into these new audiences and expanding, both your marketing, your messaging, and Oprah's, Oprah and her team, and getting on Oprah's Favorite Things that first year back in 2018. That was a major way for us to tap into an audience we never had before, and so I think it's not getting too tied into maybe your idea of what your current consumer is, but also looking into like how can you expand that messaging, how can you expand the brand messaging and positioning, and how stretchy can that brand be, so that you can kind of fit that new audience and where the consumers are. And I think that's something that we've seen really tremendous success and in partnership with Oprah's team and then also kind of goes into the partnerships and collaborations that we did with Hidden Valley and Taco Bell, again tapping into audiences that we really haven't penetrated before, and so how we're kind of adjusting or evolving that messaging to fit those audiences.
So when you're looking at these new audience that you're bringing in, as well as the ones you already are hitting it off with, what are the big trends that you're looking at currently, and what you anticipate the trends to be a few quarters from now, that are really helping you guys plan for your marketing?
Yeah, I think it's even though I oversee the paid media side for the brand, so I'm probably shooting myself in the foot with this, but it's almost kind of the reaction or an aversion to paid media and advertising that is being seen in certain audiences and especially younger audiences. So how you're adjusting, obviously, your marketing plan with that in mind. And so I think one thing that I've seen and in conversations with other marketers and in kind of the emerging brand spaces, ultimately content is king, and it's almost kind of a throwback to kind of the early .com days where whether that's creators or just content marketing really seeing a lot of success and being one of the most efficient ways that you're reaching new audiences, because I think these days, again, speaking primarily with younger audiences, but just the general market, I think there's an authentic expectation and transparency expectation a lot more with consumers these days. And so by nature, paid advertising sometimes doesn't quite sit right with that or kind of align with that. So how can you align with whether that's partners, influencers, creators in the space, to generate more organic, genuine, authentic content to reach those new audiences. I think that's definitely one. And then I mentioned this earlier, but the hot topic, obviously, the last year and a half has been the retail media space. Obviously, every retailer is developing their own retail media platform, and there's a reason why. They have that first-party customer data. So obviously, with the privacy policy changes, iOS changes, that's made it much harder to market as a DTC digitally native brand. So I think that there is a need, and there's success in the retail media platforms. And so we've been adjusting our kind of messaging and our strategy and budgets to align with that as well.
Do you find that you are meeting customers in the communities that they already kind of exist in, or you're creating space for them to come and meet you? And do you anticipate that changing at all? Like, how does that play into your plans?
I think it's a little bit of both. So I think both, obviously, with the different audiences, whether that be Oprah's audience or kind of the Hidden Valley audience, Taco Bell. I think it's obviously slightly different audiences that we're kind of meeting them where they're at and kind of adjusting our approach or our messaging to meet them there. But then we obviously own our own CRM. We have our first party email SMS list that we're creating our VIP audiences that are most highest value customers, longest LTV on the DTC space. So it's kind of a mix of both, that we're creating this community and this engagement and this environment for our most loyal customers, but then also obviously meeting the customers and the different audiences that where we're getting introduced to. And so I think that with our first party, our own audience, obviously that's where we started off with our Instagram account. So we have we're the most followed hot sauce brand on Instagram. We have a great social team that's really continuing to build up and elevate that audience and that following. And that also kind of comes along with any new product drops, limited time only. That's where we're rewarding and kind of elevating that experience as well, both from the pre-purchase as well as the post-purchase as well on the DTC side.
Cool. Actually, before you got here, Brian from Hot Pockets had touched on this interesting point that one of my mentors in this agency space, I'm relatively new to this side of the aisle, has been talking to me about a lot, talking about outside of profitability, like what is the purpose of any brand really? I think the way that I've thought about it is you have this purpose and you have your energy and you direct it at a prism of sorts, and it refracts and it goes in and touches everything else in your company, whether that's audience management, the types of people that you hire and want to bring in, your product development, and a couple examples that have stuck with me are like Monster drinks. Their purpose is to make the routine of drinking, to stay alive more or less, energetic and exciting. Or the one that also stuck with me was Slim Jim. It's not to sell jerky to people on a road trip. Theirs actually, if you ask them, is to combat boredom, which I love in its simplicity and idea and a lot of things that go along with it. But so for Truff, what are you trying to do?
Yeah. I think at its core, it's really elevate that dining experience, and that's where I think we've had a lot of fun with how I guess universal or how much you can stretch that as that could be on the go meals, that could be at cooking, if you're cooking with your family or cooking with your partner, the ability to have a great tasting elevated meal, but not have to be a brilliant chef, and I certainly am not that, and I think that's really been fun to kind of lean into that messaging and that mission, and I think when you're thinking about that, there's a much broader appeal and opportunity there. I think the challenge, obviously, there's always one is there is a certain aversion maybe to the truffle flavor. So that's certainly one that we still hear, we see, and that always is going to be a challenge, as there's not going to be a universal flavor that appeals to everybody. But the actual occasion and that experience, all the way from the unboxing to the packaging to the actual flavor profile, that's where you're kind of keeping that consistent elevation, luxury feeling is key. And I think bringing that to a more universal audience. And I think that's where our co-founders kind of had that idea with the packaging from the get-go, and that if you order any of our products online, comes in a very premium box. The unboxing experience is part of that. When it'll mirror some of the experiences with luxury beauty or perfume brands out there. So really keeping that consistent from all touch points in the journey, I think, is definitely the core to the mission.
Okay, that's great. I'm not much of a cook either, but one of my roommates is, and he has had your stuff for years, basically. And every time that he gets a chance, we'll talk about how great it's been for his experience. So it's literally close to home for me.
And I think that's what's been exciting to hear too. Just being relatively new to the brand, a year and a half, it doesn't feel like it's been that new or that long at this point, but it's amazing to see how much, and we see this in our post-purchase surveys, just how much word of mouth, referral, friends, families, they're our biggest advocates. And I think that's one thing that we've seen is that marketing funnel, at least with us, has kind of inverted in that, it isn't always the traditional marketing channels or platforms or advertising that's introducing new customers. It really is those brand advocates, and that's where I think keeping that customer journey, even post-purchase, in mind and top of mind with us has been key, because our brand advocates have been so crucial to growing the brand and expanding our new audiences.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So when you look at whether it's Snapchat or someone else in the marketing tech world or a agency like us that does a lot of the creative work, what are the kinds of, on the one hand, exciting things that you're planning to roll out in the future, and then also ideas of like where that technology can go and really impact you guys, and how people like me and a lot of the other folks in the room can like help you guys in the future and kind of orient our production towards?
Yeah, and I think obviously it's there's technology, there's partners in the space that help with this, but I think kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like adjusting or kind of tweaking that messaging for the different audiences, I think that's crucial, because I think even while we're starting to do that, as you get into the different placements, different platforms, the different even in-store retail POS material, that's a lot of messaging that you're touching, you're adjusting, you're tweaking. So helping with that, and both from a data perspective, then also actual execution in adjusting the messaging for the right audience, the right occasion, right placement. I think that's a crucial one. Like I was mentioning earlier, we're still a nimble team. We manage a lot of our both our channels, creative in-house. So any tools or kind of platforms to help with some of that automation and streamlining it is definitely key.
So also, we're going back, we didn't really touch on it much, but influencer marketing. So that's obviously been a huge factor for you guys, the social selling, all of that, a lot of people, in a sense, doing that work for you. Is that something that you guys are looking to expand further in the next few years?
Yeah, and I would hesitate to say further, because it has been such a cornerstone of the brand and how we've kind of grown over the last few years. But I think it is continuing to keep that as a key pillar in our marketing mix. And I think it was interesting to hear David speak a little earlier, as I think we've had an interesting journey as well, where I think we were very proud about the fact for a little while that we weren't paying influencers either, because we had the organic content, we had the appeal. Obviously, revise that and have continued to bring on new creators in a major way. And that continues to be such a crucial element in our marketing mix. So I think continuing to lean into the creators and influencer space, but I think it's also diversifying the platforms and kind of the placements. So we developed a YouTube series about a year ago called What the Truff. So getting more into kind of the longer form content space as well, and playing into recipes and having different personalities and influencers on that show to really kind of play off that platform as well.
What the Truff? I didn't know that.
What's the Truff?
What is your favorite Truff product?
Personally, it's the white hot sauce. So that is one of our pricier items. I was talking earlier. We are in Erewhon, and as I think those who know Erewhon, generally a little bit higher price points. So we were included on a TikTok about some of the most outrageously priced items at Erewhon, and our white hot sauce was on there, as I think we were priced at about $46 or something for a hot sauce there. So it, definitely premium price point, but that personally is my favorite one. Obviously, it helps that I have direct access to that.
Yeah, that certainly helps. I'm not sure if I'm going to shell out for that at the moment, but it's on the list. For sure. I think. Yeah, let's do the question.
All right. Justin, you're standing right next to me. Totally unprepared.
Yeah.
Okay, that was quite the build-up. Hey, Calvin. My name is Kristen. I work on marketing here at Nestle. And my question is more so on the role of e-commerce, right? So we often find digitally native businesses and brands very fascinating here, right? And I hear you say pretty clearly that you're shifting your business strategy and your investment toward retail, which makes sense just given the size of the opportunity there. But I guess I have two questions about that. With that shift, what would you say the role of e-commerce is now going to play in your business going forward? And then maybe similarly, what would be your advice for businesses that are kind of the opposite, right? So almost entirely penetrated in retail and sort of struggling to understand like the role that e-commerce plays in complement to the existing business going forward?
Yeah, no, two very good questions, and I think very top of mind is I've probably had more conversations about the role of DTC in the last 2 months than I have over the last 2 years, because I think it's been interesting to see that evolution even just over the last 2 years, as there was this big build-up during COVID, say everybody needs to launch their own DTC, like we're behind if we don't have it, and now it's kind of shifted back. It's like, well, let's not actually prioritize, or there's no reason to actually invest there. But I think strongly that it's more about you're determining the reason why you have a DTC. So I think that's at its core. So if you're already kind of thinking about that and answering that question about why, that you're already, I think, a leg up versus some other brands out there or companies out there. For Truff, it's more evolving the role. So as I mentioned, like our Hidden Valley partnership, that was an e-com exclusive. The only reason we could do that with limited quantities is because we had an already established, well fleshed out DTC channel and platform that we were able to leverage, and that's why that worked extremely well. So we're evolving it to be more of a brand experience and kind of touch point in the ecosystem or in that customer journey into our brand. And so that's why we've really built out our recipe program, our content kind of library around truffles and hot sauce, and really kind of leaning into that more, along with product exclusive product drops for our loyal DTC customers. So it's about better integrating that into the overall customer journey and being that kind of entry point or touch point within kind of a customer journey with the brand. For brands that obviously well penetrated, heavily obviously saturated in the market already, I think that's where it's important to, from my perspective, is kind of leverage DTC as that incubation innovation lab. And I think that's where knowing that, and I mentioned that earlier, that we're at the advantage being a small, nimble team, that we're able to pivot, we're able to pull budgets. I think that's where it's best served when you set it up as its kind of own business unit in that sense, because being successful at DTC, I think, is partially being able to be agile and be nimble, and being able to adjust, pivot, roll out timelines much quicker than you might otherwise with other departments or other spaces. So I think that's how I would leverage it. But again, it's all dependent on each business or each company, I think, and what you're looking to get from it.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.